Prague is a fairy tale town of magical beauty, sitting at the very heart of Europe, a place that's been an intersection of continental merchant routes since time immemorial. Centuries of construction have given rise to an exceptional integrated architectural complex, unique in the world as regards its size and concentration of cultural heritage. Prague is situated in the heart of Bohemia, which has a ring of mountainous surroundings. The fertile soil, natural water streams and resources have played a vital role in the city's early development. The Vltava River runs through the city, adding to the breathtaking landscape. Leading from the Old Town Square to Powder Gate, the vivid and gently curving Celetnà Street is full of souvenir shops, small cafes and restaurants, all situated in picturesque buildings of various architectonic styles. Celetnà Street is a part of the royal route, the coronation route of Czech kings that ends at Prague Castle. The street received its name because of the guild of bakers who lived there from the 13th to 15th centuries. On Celetnà, one of Prague's oldest streets, stands evidence of the past's beautiful historical houses, decorated with breathtaking house symbols and facades. A typical sign of Renaissance architecture is graffiti, inscribed ornamentation on damp render, which looks akin to envelopes. Another characteristic was straight windows, wide and spacious buildings, pillars, arcade galleries, cylindrical vaults, wooden compartment ceilings, and many other features. Powder Tower was built after 1475 by the late Gothic architect Matěj Řezek on the site of Odrana Gate. Originally it was called Mountain Gate, and it acquired the name Powder Tower only in the 17th century, when a store of gunpowder was kept there. Most of the original stone decoration has been destroyed over time. Construction of the 65-metre-high Powder Tower began under the reign of King Vladisław II Jagiello, and for a few centuries it was known as the New Tower. It used to form one of the 13 entrances to the Old Town and contribute to the beauty of the royal court, the king's residence. The facade of Municipal House is eye-catching, not only due to its monumental architectural composition, but also because of the unique profile created by its collection of the sculptural art of the time. It's located in the very centre of Prague, directly neighbouring Powder Gate. There's a mosaic above the decorative entrance called Prague Apotheosis. There are allegorical sculptures representing the nation at the sides, and a balcony is situated under the mosaic. Monumental allegorical figures displayed all over the facade of the building, which were created by some of the greatest artists, represent particular historical and classical cultural symbols, such as allegories of the nation, Prague, legendary characters and events, personification of art, philosophy and science, but they're also inspired by modern-day symbols with allegories of industry, trade and transport. The beauty is in the detail of Municipal House, intricate gilded decorations, exquisite ceramics, and vivid stained glass windows. The interior is decorated with the works of the best Czech artists from the first decade of the 20th century. The ground floor, beyond the main entrance from Namesti Republiky, contains a lounge with marble wainscoting and an oriental mosaic floor created by G. Petrucci. The large building boasts a stunning concert hall, a grand cafe and restaurant, as well as exhibition halls, meeting rooms, and a basement bar. Designed by Antonín Balsánek and Oswald Polívka and built on the former site of the Royal Court Palace, Municipal House is a popular monument. The history of the palace began at the end of the 19th century, when it had become obvious that Prague needed a multi-purpose building that would also express its now predominantly Czech character. With its ancient buildings and magnificent churches, this is one of the most beautiful historical sites in Europe. The most notable building on the Old Town Square is the beautiful St.Nicholas Church, which was completed in 1735. It replaced a parish church mentioned in records dating back as early as 1273. The radical Baroque of Bohemia is mainly characterized by expressiveness, plasticity, monumentality, dramatic effect and movement, and St. Nicholas's Church is one of the best examples of this style. The front is covered with sculptures by Antonín Braun. St. Nicholas's Church belonged to Lutherans in the 16th century, but then Protestantism was suppressed in Czech lands. The church became a Catholic sanctuary in 1620, and the black monks resided there. Inside a vast Trompe-l'œil fresco, gigantic sculptures, sparkling golden altarpieces, countless paintings, stucco or wooden decorative details present one of the best examples of art synthesis in the Baroque era. The spectacular richness of the decor is mind-blowing. The interior composition draws the eye towards the grand altar and the lateral altars, and the best artists of the time contributed to the unique decoration of the church. Started by P. Boss and continued by G. D. Orsi, the church is chiefly the work of the Dietzenhofer architects, who completely changed the initial project and built this masterpiece, whose architectural significance is exceptional. Christoph Dietzenhofer took command of the construction work in 1702. His son then completed the nave and built the monumental dome and the magnificent facade. He played with architectural elements with convex and concave forms, thus creating exceptional undulating and dynamic effects. St. Nicholas's Church used to be a Protestant shrine. St. Nicholas's Church, with its robust dome and thin bell tower, is an inseparable part of the Prague Castle skyline. It's one of the most sought-after Prague churches. It's also one of the leading Baroque constructions in Europe and is usually defined as the most beautiful building of Czech Baroque. The Old Town Square, heart of the Merchants' District, is one of the most famous squares in Europe. It was the stage of many major events, both tragic and glorious, throughout Czech history. The story of the square can be traced back to the Romanesque era, a time when it served as a market in the heart of the merchant district. It was known across the whole of Europe at that time. Most of the palaces lining the square present Baroque or classical facades, but their walls and their cellars are much older. They date back to the Romanesque and Gothic eras. The proud figure of Jan Hus stands as a focal point. This Czech reformer was burnt at the stake in 1415 for his heretical ideas. 5 centuries later, he was considered a true symbol of national independence. The sculpture by Ladislav Saluan, which was created in 1915, shows him rising against all injustice and announcing a new era. Among the magnificent houses and palaces surrounding the Old Town Square, Galt's Kinsky Palace, with its elegant Rococo decoration, is worth a particular mention. What makes the palace very special is the fact that it doesn't stand in one line with the neighbouring buildings, but protrudes a little into the square. The impressive church of Our Lady Before Time was known as the Cathedral of Merchants. The 2 spires of this powerful-looking Gothic church can be seen from all over Prague. The present large church was built in the 14th century by stonemasons Peter Parler and Matthias of Arras. Many houses of the old street situated in the historical centre of Prague were originally Gothic, and some of them have remains of Romanesque architecture inside. The building material was stone, and new techniques enabled people to build high, spacious buildings, illuminated by light coming through big windows. The square contains one of the world's most pristine and varied collections of architecture, from Art Nouveau to Baroque, Renaissance, Cubist, Gothic, Neoclassical and ultra-modern. In the 13th century, the emperor conferred an independence charter to the old town, a district of merchants and of rich aristocrats. It remained a self-governing jurisdiction until 1784, when the four historic towns were united to become a single entity. In the 14th century, the community decided to build a town hall to serve as the seat of the independent municipal council. Due to a lack of money, the council first set up its headquarters in a small building on the square. This became bigger by the gradual purchase of adjoining houses throughout the centuries, the building of a big tower, of a chapel, and finally of the eastern wing. The old town hall is mainly renowned for its astronomical clock, which attracts thousands of tourists who want to admire the hourly parade of painted wooden statues, the apostles, Christ, the allegories of death and of vanity, and the Archangel Michael. There are 3 circles on the dial showing different time. The outer circle, with Schwabacher numerals, shows the old Czech time. The circle with Roman numbers shows the Central European time. And the inner circle, with Arabic numerals, shows Babylonian time. The blue part of the dial represents the sky above the horizon, the brown part the sky below it. The clock consists of 3 parts, built in vertical succession: the procession of the apostles, the astronomical dial, and Joseph Mainz's calendar, created in 1866 in the form of a round disc with allegorical portrayals of the 12 months of the year. There's a zodiac ring which represents the stars in the sky, and it moves according to it. The 2 clock hands bear the signs of the sun and the moon. The pink-coloured Renaissance-style house features a richly decorated window with the city's coat of arms. It's the council house. A magnificent late Gothic door in the house adjacent to the tower serves as the main entrance to the old town hall. Prague's unique medieval heart can be seen in the atmospheric Gothic lanes, blackened stone facades, arches and churches, and freshly restored Baroque and Renaissance buildings. Today it's home to international companies and fashion designers, and is the centre of nightlife for the amount of bars, clubs and restaurants on every corner. In Marian Square, Municipal House, the new town hall, built on the site of the Royal Court between 1906 and 1912, is Prague's most prominent Art Nouveau building. In the square, the Clementinum used to be a Jesuit school that served as a spearhead for the Catholic reconquest. This huge Baroque complex in the heart of the city is set around 4 courtyards, with the National Library, 2 churches, 3 chapels, exhibition and concert halls, as well as 2 towers, including the renowned astronomical tower. One of the most representative neo-Renaissance buildings in Prague is the Rudolphinum. Czech architects Zotek and Schultz built this magnificent structure along the Vltava River, prominently located near Charles Bridge. The Rudolphinum was constructed in the second half of the 19th century and named in honor of Crown Prince Rudolf of Habsburg. The whole building underwent significant changes during the general reconstruction in the years 1990 to 1992, according to the project by Karel Prager. During this reconstruction, some additions were partly removed. The spaces used for concert activities were newly renovated, and the northern exhibition part was returned to its original purpose. It was originally designed as an art gallery and house of artists, and then in 1946 it became the seat of the Czech Philharmonic Orchestra. The Czech Philharmonic's very first concert took place in 1896 in the Rudolphinum and was conducted by Antonín Dvorak. The period that's referred to as historism was most especially in architecture a certain mixture of styles. These styles had been in existence before. In other words, these were historical styles, and hence the name historism. Its emergence dates back to the first half of the 19th century, although it lasted to the beginning of Art Nouveau. The primary inspiration was Classicism, but other styles such as Baroque, Renaissance, and even Gothic were also copied. This nostalgic return to previous styles marked the end of compact styles. The River Vltava flows through Prague for 31 kilometers and at its widest measures 330 meters. The Vltava has created some interesting places in Prague, islands and meanders, providing many idyllic scenes. The Vltava River is Prague's main waterway, around which the city has developed over the past 1,000 years. The river adds to the atmosphere of the capital and separates the city into two almost identical parts, eastern and western. The Tava rises in Šumava, where it starts as a small babbling stream. Both sides of Prague, separated by the Tava, are connected with 20 bridges. Further out, the Vltava River meanders through pretty countryside, passing the occasional castle or historic building. The visitor can enjoy a privileged view of the charming embankments of Prague and admire the exceptional panorama on the castle promontory and the historic districts. This is an original way of discovering the architectural gems of the capital city, while enjoying a different viewpoint from the river. In 1992, the historic centre of Prague was added to the Unesco Natural and Cultural World Heritage List. Almost 2,000 buildings are inscribed on the National Register of Prague Intangible Cultural Monuments, among which 1,440 are located within the conservation area. The major ones were classified as National Cultural Monuments. Centuries of construction have given rise to an exceptional integrated architectural complex, unique in the world as regards its size and concentration of cultural heritage. St. George's Church, one of the most beautiful Romanesque remains of the city, is concealed in the heart of the Prague Castle complex. Outside the building, on the western side, is a beautiful bas-relief that represents St. George and the Dragon. St. George's Church was founded in 920. It was, as was the cathedral, one of the very first stone buildings on the site of the Prague Castle complex. The Baroque facade was added in the 17th century, and its two white towers can be seen from afar. As was the case with the cathedral, the St. George Basilica served as a royal mausoleum, and it played an important part in the religious life of Bohemia in the Middle Ages. A visit to St. George's Convent, adjacent to the church, is independent from the basilica. Benedictine nuns settled there in 970, founding the oldest convent in Bohemia. St. Vitus's Cathedral is Prague's supreme Gothic building. It's the see of the Prague Archdiocese, located in the heart of the castle complex, the centre of the city's spiritual life. The cathedral was built over several centuries and shelters numerous historic and artistic gems. On the outside, at the southern entrance, the magnificent golden Venetian mosaic glitters in the sun. The southern entrance, also called the Golden Gate, leads directly to the St. Wenceslas Chapel. The building that can now be visited is the result of a lengthy construction spread over more than 5 centuries. A stone rotunda used to stand in its place in the 10th century, and later a Romanesque church. The sepulchres of St. Wenceslas and St. Adalbert, both patron saints of Bohemia, were placed in the cathedral in the Middle Ages. The idea of such a huge Gothic cathedral for the newly founded archdiocese came from Emperor Charles IV in the 14th century. The spires of St. Vitus's Cathedral soar above the ramparts. This is the official main entrance to the cathedral, and it's also the newest part. St. Vitus's Cathedral consists of a central nave and narrow aisles, with small chapels and the northern transept. The Emperor Charles IV first summoned the French architect Matthias of Arras, whose work in the choir recalls the style of the great French cathedrals. After he died, he was replaced by Peter Parler, the Emperor's main architect, who completed the choir with an amazing and very invented filleted vault, with intertwined ribs that form a grand organic-like and dynamic space. The Hussite Wars forced construction work to stop for a long period of time. The cathedral was completed at the beginning of the 20th century by Joseph Mocker. The rose window is perhaps the most beautiful. It sprang from the same roots as Romanesque art and was its natural continuation. Gothic culture started coming to the Czech land from the second half of the 13th century from France, where it originated in the 12th century. Gothic style was influenced by the advance in craft. There was a strong desire to forget about worldwide misery and find salvation in God. Faith in an afterlife in God's realm was the keynote. The building material used was stone, and new techniques enabled people to build tall, spacious buildings, illuminated by light coming through big windows. One of the most distinctive characteristics of Gothic architecture is the pointed arch seen in windows and entrances. Gothic architecture is rich in religious symbolism. Pointed arches reminiscent of hands joined in prayer. Almost all buildings were richly decorated with spires, rosettes, and gargoyles. The Prague Castle complex is a national cultural monument, the symbol of more than 1,000 years of the development of the Czech state. The Prague Castle complex has several courtyards and squares. On the castle square, this Baroque-style palace was built at the end of the 18th century as a home for Count Attenberg, a leading member of the Bohemian aristocracy. Today it houses the Czech National Gallery's exhibition of early European art. The visitor enters Courtyard 1 of the castle through Matthias Gate, which dates back to 1614 and is guarded by 2 castle guards. There's a changing of the guard each hour at the gates. This is done in a formal manner, with the parade bringing in 2 new guards and leaving with the 2 guards that have done their shift. The decorated gate has statues of fighting giants and vases by Ferdinand Platzer. In order to pass to the second courtyard with Cole's Fountain and St. Cross Chapel, the visitor must walk under this door. Little Quarter is a special part of Prague. It surrounds Prague Castle and is rich in Baroque and Renaissance architecture in the narrow streets of the city. Nerodova, Royal Way or King's Road, is the historic street linking Prague Castle to Charles Bridge, via Mala Strana. In the centre of the square stands Plague Column. The Black Death, raging through Europe in the 14th century, largely bypassed the area that's now the Czech Republic. Many areas throughout the country have plague columns built by the survivors to commemorate the dead. This masterpiece, built by the architects Dietzenhofer, father and son, is one of the most beautiful Baroque churches in Central Europe and the most striking example of the so-called radical Baroque in Bohemia. With its majestic dome, its bell tower, and its undulating facade with dynamic lines, the church dominates the whole Mala Strana district. There are 3 St.Nicholas churches in Prague. Construction of St. Nicholas's Church at Malostranské Namesti began in 1703. This is the largest of Prague's churches, founded by the Jesuits. The belfry was the last part to be built, constructed by Anselmo Lurago. The Church of St. Francis of Assisi is located in the very heart of Prague, right next to Charles Bridge. The Baroque cupolas of the church emerge spectacularly from the vast sea of the city's roofs. The 2 towers of Charles Bridge from the lesser quarter side differ in size and style. The Old Town Bridge Tower is a beautiful Gothic tower guarding one end of Charles Bridge and heralding the entrance to the Old Town. This blackened, aged gate was completed in 1380 and forms part of the old fortification system of Prague, built to protect the Old Town against northern invaders. There are symbols of countries under the reign of Charles IV above the gateway. The Old Town Bridge Tower was built at the end of the 14th century, according to a plan by Peter Parler, the favourite architect of Emperor Charles IV. It took about 25 years to build, and about 100 stonecutters participated in the building. Charles Bridge is an inseparable feature from Prague. It was built in the 14th century during the Gothic era and is the symbol of the city. It's adorned with a unique gallery of sculptures, a true triumphant guard of honor that symbolically connects the riverbanks. The bridge received most of its religious sculptures at the turn of the 17th century. Imitating the pattern of the Bridge of Angels in Rome, it forms an extraordinary triumphant alley that connects both banks of the city, the earth and the sky. The best artists of the time distinguished themselves in a particularly fruitful climate of artistic competition and rivalry. The sculptures that visitors can see today are usually copies of the original pieces. On the other side, the bridge is bordered by 2 towers, each of a different height. The older one, the Judith Tower, dates back to the Romanesque era in the 12th century. The higher one dates back to the 15th century and offers a beautiful view on the city. In spite of various floods and partial renovations throughout history, the bridge that visitors walk on when crossing the river in the historic centre is still the same old medieval bridge. Jindrisska Street connects the three most important squares in Prague: Wenceslas Square, Charles Square, and Celetnà Square. Jindrisska Tower dates from the late Gothic era. It was constructed from 1472 to 1476, although it's had several rebuilds and alterations since then. The tower clock was added in 1577. Following a major fire in 1745, Jindrisska was rebuilt in the Baroque style. Then, in the 1870s, it was reconverted back to the Gothic style by the famous architect Mocker. The Jerusalem Synagogue was built in 1906 in Newtown and has also been called the Jubilee Synagogue. The Jerusalem Synagogue is an interesting example of Art Nouveau stylization of the morphology of the Moorish style. The ground plan of the synagogue comprises a basilica-type triple nave with two transverse wings. The main facade displays a large Islamic arch and a rosette window with the Star of David in the center and a biblical verse along the perimeter. The facade of this structure is colorful and delights with detail. Stripes, scrollwork and pillars make the synagogue a remarkable example of early 20th century architecture. Now Prikope Street is a promenade connecting Wenceslas Square with Republic Square. It's one of the most important shopping and banking places in Prague. Na Prikope means in the ditch, because for centuries there used to be a ditch separating the old town from the new town. Prague is called the textbook of architecture because all architectural styles, from the 10th century until present, have been represented in a small area. The carefully planned new town was founded by Charles IV in 1348. Twice as large as the old town, it was mainly inhabited by tradesmen and craftsmen. During the late 19th century, its outer fortifications were demolished and redeveloped to its present appearance. Na Prikope Street has architectural majesty spanning 1,000 years. Beautiful Renaissance frescoes, solid Baroque palaces, or old houses with the elements of the best Prague architecture. It's like wandering through the city's pages of rich history. Na Prikope Street existed in this area even in the Middle Ages, when the new town was built. As this street was quite wide, it soon became the main thoroughfare. In 1977, construction of the metro started, On the 4th of July 1984, the tram line was liquidated and was replaced by the pedestrian zone. The emergence of a nation started with the first ethnically identifiable inhabitants of the area. A Celtic people lived there from the 4th century BC until about the 2nd century AD. They were followed by a Germanic people who left during the so-called migration of nations in the 5th century. Slavic-speaking groups made the area their homeland no later than the 6th century. Among them were the Czechs in central Bohemia and the Moravians along the Morava and Dyje rivers to the east. In the first half of the 11th century, Oldrich of the princely and later royal Czech dynasty of the Přemysls brought Moravia under his control, and Bohemia and Moravia then became the foundation of the Czech state. The crowning of the first Bohemian king took place in 1085, and the first university in Central Europe was founded in Prague in 1348. The development of Czech national culture came to a temporary halt in 1620, when the Czech states were defeated in the Battle of White Mountain. A period referred to as the Darkness lasted until the end of the 18th century, when the Czech national revival with the formation of the modern Czech nation began. Wenceslas Square is one of two main squares in the city centre. The 750-metre long and 60-metre wide boulevard that makes up Wenceslas Square was laid out over 600 years ago, during the reign of Charles IV. It was originally used as the Prague horse market. St. Wenceslas was actually a love-checked king, propagating Christianity. He ruled over Prague in the 10th century. Legend says that he was murdered when he was going to the morning religious service by the mercenaries sent by his brother Boleslav. He represents national Czech continuity and nationhood, and he's celebrated every year on the 27th of September. Over the years, the square has been a regular parade ground for all kinds of organizations and political parties. From anti-communist uprisings to celebrations of national sporting achievements, Wenceslas Square is where the Czechs come to let off steam. It can comfortably hold up to 400,000 people. The street is dominated by a mounted statue of St. Wenceslas, made by Joseph Milsbeck, from 1887 to 1924, and located in front of the National Museum. The image of St. Wenceslas is accompanied by other Czech patron saints carved into the ornate statue base: St. Ludmila, St. Agnes of Bohemia, St. Prikope, and St. Adalbert of Prague. The National Museum in Prague is the largest and oldest museum in the Czech Republic. A monumental neo-Renaissance building, the National Museum was designed by Schultz as an architectural symbol of the Czech national revival. The National Museum is built on the site of the former Horse Gate. The entrance hall of the National Museum is very grand, with sweeping staircases and intricate stonework. Prague is a fairy tale town of magical beauty, sitting at the very heart of Europe. This gem of original European architecture is a beautiful and romantic city, with breathtaking views, quiet gardens, rides on riverboats, and relaxing strolls along narrow cobblestone lanes. With its history dating back more than 1,000 years, the Czech capital is still a thriving modern city.